Well, hello everyone, and welcome back for our last lesson in this series of lessons on baptism. In this lesson, we're going to be sort of putting together all of the pieces of those things that we have talked about together so far, and we have one last important step forward to take when it comes to baptism, and you might even say that it's the most important step of all. And to help us think about this last step forward, I'd like to share with you a story. It is a Bible story, although it might be kind of a surprising place to turn at this point because technically it is not a story about baptism per se. But what I think that we're going to find is that it is a really helpful story if you are considering making your response. Response is our theme for today, and that's why I'd like to share Naaman's story with you. Now, the story of Naaman is one that we find in our Old Testaments. It is in the book called 2 Kings chapter 5, and it's a story that begins by introducing us to this fellow Naaman. So we learn in verse 1 of that chapter that Naaman is the commander of the army of a king named Aram. Now, this is not one of Israel's kings. And so Naaman is not one of Israel's generals. In fact, what we find is that this story that we're about to hear comes from outside of God's people, Israel, the people that take center stage in the story of the Old Testament. Naaman is an outsider to that story, to the people of Israel, and even to their God. In fact, when we come to verse 1, it is not even really clear to us whether Naaman has ever heard of the one true God, the God of Israel before. We don't know whether he knows of God yet or not. What we know is that he is an army general on the other side of the battle lines from Israel, an enemy to Israel. And we also know that he is pretty good at what he does. Verse 2 tells us that Naaman is a mighty warrior. But even as mighty as a warrior he was, Naaman has this problem that he himself cannot fix. Naaman, though he is a mighty warrior, suffered from leprosy. And if you've not heard of leprosy before, it is a skin disease which at its worst can be life-threatening. And it is also a disease that is very isolating. We know of many cases in the ancient world where people who had leprosy were forced by law to be cast out of their families and towns and communities for fear of spreading this really dangerous disease. And so here we have Naaman, this mighty warrior, this alpha male, this person who's strong and skillful in battle, and he's winning at life in all of these different ways that he can control. But here we're finding that for all of his might and for all of his merits, Naaman has this problem that he cannot control. He has this problem that he cannot solve on his own. And it's a serious one. Mighty Naaman needs some help. Naaman is fighting a battle that he cannot win. And this is where the story gets really interesting. Because wouldn't you know it, through a series of unlikely encounters, and you can read about these in verses 3 through 8 if you want to read this story in full, but through a series of unlikely encounters, word starts to get around to Naaman, mighty Naaman, that just across the border into enemy territory in Israel, there is a man who serves a God who just might be able to help him with this problem that he can't solve. There is a man who serves a God who might be able to help him to win this battle with leprosy that Naaman himself cannot win. And that man's name was Elisha. Elisha, the prophet of God. So Naaman in verse 9, he goes to Elisha with great haste, and he brings with him his horses and his chariots. You can think of him arriving in tough guy, army general fashion to meet Elisha, and he's ready to take on the world. He's ready to do whatever it takes to win this battle against leprosy. And Elisha says, all right, here's what you're going to do. Go wash in the Jordan River 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean. So here's Elisha, and he says, here's the secret that you've come all this way to learn. Here's the big reveal. Go to the river and wash up, and you'll be made clean. Now, what do you think Naaman says to that? What do you think that Naaman is thinking right now? Oh, great. I've come all the way down here for you to tell me that the big secret, Elisha, is wash your hands and take a bath? Like, you think I haven't tried that? Like this is some big secret formula that's going to cure me from my life-threatening disease? Like just wash in a river? That's what you're telling me? Are you kidding me? And have you seen the Jordan River? Naaman is thinking to himself, first of all, I've got rivers back home that I could have washed in if that was some secret formula to save me. And while we're at it, the rivers I've got back home, they're cleaner and they're better and they're a whole lot nicer than the Jordan River. In other words, thanks for nothing. Thanks for nothing, Prophet Elisha. And Naaman starts to turn and walk away. He turned and went away in a rage, verse 12 says. And why did he do that? Why did he turn? Why did he get so angry? And why is he on the verge of rejecting this instruction that he's just received? Why does Naaman turn and walk away? Could it be that the solution just didn't fit what he was expecting? It caught him off guard, like he just couldn't see how this, of all things, was going to solve his problem. Could it be that? Could it be that he just hadn't quite given up on solving this problem himself? Like, here's a man who overcomes his problems. He outstrengths them. He outworks them. He overwhelms them. And on the battlefield, he wins again and again and again. And he's just not ready to say yet, okay, I give up. It's your way. I admit defeat. Do you think maybe he's still searching for a way that he can do it himself? Could it be that he just hasn't quite gotten it through in his mind that the answer to his problem is not some secret magic formula, and the key to his victory is not some heroic act that he's going to perform, but instead the key to his victory is actually a simple act of faith, a demonstration of I know it feels silly and vulnerable, but I'm going to be obedient. It's a simple response that holds the key, but that means putting all of the power and all of the trust in somebody else to win this battle. And could it be that Naaman is just not quite there yet? He's just not quite seeing it. And so he turns to walk away. But just at that moment, a voice of reason enters his life from right by his side. It is his servant who says to him, Naaman, Father, if the prophet had commanded you to do something difficult, would you not have done it? How much more so when he said to you, all he said to you was, wash and be clean. Like if it had been something heroic, Naaman, you would have jumped at the opportunity. You would have risked your life. You would have done anything to save yourself. But Naaman, this one's not about you being the hero. This one's about responding in simple obedience to the God who can make you clean. And it's not impressive what you're being asked to do. And it's going to take faith. But if this is what you're being asked to do, why would you walk away from the answer when it's just right here? A simple, faithful response is all God asks of you. So Naaman stops and thinks about these things. He thinks it over. And he has a change of heart. He sets aside his skepticism. He sets aside his pride. He admits defeat in a battle that he cannot win. And he went down and he immersed himself 7 times in the Jordan River according to the word of the man of God. And his flesh was restored like the flesh of a young boy. And he was made clean. That's Naaman's story. And it's probably not going to surprise you where I'm going with this, because I'm wondering, as you heard Naaman's story, I'm wondering, were you thinking to yourself, yeah, this is our story too? Were you thinking to yourself, yeah, this is my story also? Because just like Naaman, no matter how things may be going in our lives, like even if things are going like really well in our jobs or really well at school or really well in our families or maybe not, and even if we have like all the nicest things and the nicest car and the nicest house and the picture perfect life, or maybe we don't, but either way, no matter how things may be going in our lives, just like Naaman, we too have this problem that we ourselves cannot solve. It's the problem of sin that we've been talking about all throughout this series, and it's serious like leprosy. It's life-threatening. It's isolating and separating. It's a battle that we can't win alone. But like Naaman, one way or another, word has gotten around to you that there's hope. It might come from an unexpected source. And maybe when you started this series, you had some skepticism. Maybe you still do. About this whole baptism thing. We talked about what baptism is in this series, and we talked about how when you're immersed in the water, it is this meaning-filled act, like how it really changes us in our life and in our relationship, like in a wedding ceremony, like how it tells the story of Christ's death and burial and resurrection, and how we share in it, dying and rising again in the water, and how it's really this meaningful thing that we do. But maybe like Naaman, there's still some part of you that says, yeah, but it really still just kind of looks like being dunked in the water in a pool. It sure doesn't look like the answer that I expected to the problem that I'm facing. Like maybe some part of you still kind of says that. And we've talked in this series about what baptism says and how when we're baptized, we're proclaiming our faith in Jesus who died for our sins. But we are also saying to God, I know I'm fighting a battle that I myself cannot win. I am a sinner who needs rescuing. I'm a sinner who needs God's grace to wash me clean. But maybe just like Naaman, there's still that part of you that's saying, yeah, but I really thought that I was going to be the one who could solve this problem for myself. Like, I'm not quite ready to admit defeat yet. To say, okay, it's your way now. Not quite ready to say that I can't do this myself. Maybe there's a part of you that still says that. And we've talked in this series about what baptism does, how through baptism God saves his sons and daughters and starts our new life in the Spirit and in the church. And he does all of this in this simple way, through this simple act of faithful obedience. But maybe like Naaman, there's still this part of you that says, well, that's just really kind of out of my comfort zone. I'd be much more comfortable doing it some other way, even if it was something that was greater and mightier and required more strength or risk, but this simple surrender, it's actually kind of hard for me to do. There may be parts of us, like Naaman, that say those very things. And what I would say to you is that's not unusual. And it's not something to be ashamed of. And it's certainly not something that disqualifies you or me in any way. And it's not something that God can't overcome, just like he did with Naaman. But at the end of the day, we, like Naaman, are given a choice. We could turn and walk away like Naaman almost did because it just seemed strange, or it just wasn't really comfortable, or it's not what we expected, or we want to be the hero who saves the day for ourselves. We could walk away, or we could make the simple, faithful, obedient response that is right there before us, like Naaman chose to do. And it doesn't look impressive. And it does take some faith. But if you have come to realize that you believe in Jesus and that you realize you need God's grace to save you from sin, a simple, faithful, obedient response is all that God asks of you. Like Naaman, if you choose to be baptized, you can be washed clean and saved by God and find victory in that answer that is right there before you. As we said in our very first lesson together, the power of a realization is in the response. And maybe you've come to some realizations through this journey we've been going through together about Jesus, about yourself, and about what God can do through baptism for you to wash you clean, to save your life. So maybe it's time for you to embrace the power of those realizations and respond. Maybe it's time for you to take the plunge. I want you to know that we are here and ready when you're ready. Night and day, we're here to help you, whether that's to learn more, if you still have more that you need to learn about what baptism is and what a difference it can make in your life. We've covered a lot of the big things in this series, we really have. But you may have some specific personal questions that you want to address. Well, that's what we're here for. We're ready to help. We're ready to walk with you and help you to Discuss all that you need to discuss about this decision and this response in your life. At the end of the day, the choice is yours for you to make. Like Naaman, we have the opportunity, if we choose, to walk away from this. But my hope and prayer is that you will make Naaman's choice, which is the simple and faithful and obedient choice. Because I know that God is ready and able to wash you clean and save you and bring the victory into your life. This is a battle that God can win. And maybe it's time for you to make your response. God bless you as you consider these things. And please know that we are here for you and praying for you and ready to be there for you when you are ready to take the plunge.